Okay, folks, I just wanted to give you a little tutorial on MLA since some of you have either never seen it or haven't seen it in a number of years. Don't be intimidated by this paper. This is a college level, graduate level paper that I wrote many moons ago, as you can see. I just think it's a good example of some elements that you need to have in your research paper. So this is an epigraph. It's not necessary, but I find that there are neat little ways to inform the reader about really what your topic will be right underneath your title of the paper. And the title can be as creative as you want it to be. And the subject matter is to your discretion. I would like to be able to approve your topic before you move forward and start researching, but as a general rule, I don't like to give topics because I find that when students are allowed to pick their own, they're far more invested in the research. So this is my title, my epigraph, and then I go right into my thesis. So the thesis statement, as you'll see from week one's materials, is the what, why, and how of your topic. So what's your topic, why is it important, and how will you execute it? What, why, and how. You also, in some cases, if it's a more controversial topic, may want to include an antithesis, what the opposing side will say about the topic. So dwarfs, human figures that lack perfect physiological symmetry, have long been regarded as objectified members of society. That's my thesis, right? Similarly, dwarfs are rarely identified as beloved circus performers. They do not have proportional bodies like their contemporaries, midgets, who received much of the adoration from performers and audiences alike. That is my full thesis. I do have to integrate here that these are not proper terms in regular society, midgets, dwarfs, but in the circus world, they're still used to identify different kinds of quote-unquote people with short stature, okay? It is not politically correct to use those terms, though, in modern society. And then an antithesis. While they may have found more social acceptance within the sideshow, they were regarded as subjugated under the big top. So that's the other side of it, showing how they were subjugated is the thesis, but also acknowledging that there was acceptance within that platform for those people with different bodies. And then how will you execute it? I include some specifics that I'll include in the research, which is also necessary. Consider that your thesis paragraph is a roadmap for your readers. Then once we get into this part, by opening the discourse, that's the kind of why I chose it. And this is how I will execute it. So that piece is very important to establish the foundation of your paper. And then I'll show you what a direct quote looks like in MLA format, Modern Language Association. So to give credit where credit is due for this material, I give a nice little introduction about the author here. I note where I got it, and then I have the actual direct quote with quotation marks, and this is an introductory page, which is why it's X instead of a numeric number that we're used to. So that's one way to integrate material into your research. And then another way is a partial quotation. Sometimes you only need part of the quote to make your point within your paper. So in this case, I set up the quote, I give the quote, and because I've already noted who the author is up here, I only need to give page reference here. Then as I move into this section, this is what we call a block style quote. This is a longer quote. And this is always offset 2 tabs in. And because it's inset like that, you don't need to have your quotation marks, only for a long quote. And in here you'll see, again, authorship's already established, so all we need here is the page reference. Now in this case, the only time that you put your period before your parenthetical, parentheses here, is in the case of a super long quote. And as a rule, we don't offset longer quotes unless they're 40 words or longer. So you do have to do a little bit of calculation there. And then this is another example of a quote that is set up that is not using the word for word. So I have put this in my own words, and we call that paraphrasing. And you'll note that a paraphrasing is only successful if you do not use any words that are within the original document. You have to completely take it out of context, put it in your own words, and still share the page reference where you got it from. Now, I haven't changed authorship, which is why you don't see an author's last name here. If I did switch authorship somewhere up here, you'd see the author's last name and the page reference given in that case. So that's a good example of paraphrasing, putting it in your own words. You have to be really careful with that. If it's too close to the original, you might get ticked for plagiarism. So that's why I put a lot of focus on the MLA. This one is also a partial direct quote. Again, only need as much as I have here, and these elliptical or ellipses marks simply indicate that some material was taken out that was not necessary for the argument in this paragraph. And again, authorship was established up here, just need the page reference there. And in this case, if you have to interrupt a direct quote to have it make grammatical sense in your own work, in this case, I had to change the verb tense. So these brackets, not parentheses, brackets mean interruption, parentheses mean inclusion. Okay? Emphasis is mine. I note that I emphasized her here. It was not like that in the original text. So I have to make that notation there in brackets as well. And I know this stuff seems pretty dull, but I think if you keep this and go back through it once in a while as you're writing your research papers, you'll find it's very useful. And then if we go down here, this is an example of what we call an indirect quote. Both author of the wording is credited as well as the editor of the text or anthology. Many of you will find that you're working with anthologies, which are large collections of material, or you're working with a textbook for class, in which case probably you have several authors and or editors that have to be mentioned to give them credit. So in this case, this is the source that I pulled it from by Mabel, and this is the page reference I got it from. So that's the book. I know who wrote this particular quote within that book here. So that's why it's called an indirect, because this person said it, but this person acknowledged it and has to also get credit for it in your paper. Indirect quotes are a little more tricky, and they take a little bit of nuance to revise those. And then this is what typically we used to call these footnotes, endnotes, reference pages for APA, and for MLA we call them the works cited. And always the author is given first unless you're dealing with a film. In this case, you'll see that I've given the film title, the director, the major performers. The year is very important, the original year in this case. It was also refitted or reformatted in 2004, so I need to acknowledge that. This is what it's called. It's a video disc. These are the people that produced it, and this is what it was on as a format. You'll note here it's an author, last name first, only one author, so it stays like that. This is, in this case, it's an article within a book. So in this case, you would use the quotation marks to indicate your article title. This is the book title that follows. The editor is acknowledged, the city of publication, the publishing company, year, and then pages here. You can't see it because it's a little funky, but it's page references that you got it from. And then print means it's a printed document. I'll go down to another one that's a little bit different. In this case, I'm going to skip this one for now, but we can go back to that one if anybody happens to have a piece that was published earlier, like the film up here, and then also has a later date of publication. Probably won't see much of that this semester, though. And then I noted the film. You cite that. And this is just another example of if you wanted to start with an image, even, and then there's an epigram again. Epigraph, sorry, the title, and then note that I have another direct quote here. Whenever you see these Roman numerals in smaller caps, that means it's probably from the foreword or the introduction of the book. When you're not given a director, then you would just shift to the title. Or if you're not given an author, you would go to the title of the piece next. So MLA does make allowances for odd sources that don't necessarily have authorship as well. You don't have to do these little subtitles within your paper unless you think it informs the reader or helps you keep it more organized. I did in this case because it was a larger work. But I think that that's a really good place to stop so that you guys actually have a sense of what MLA is for those who have never worked with it before. I don't want you to be in panic mode once you see this stuff. This is an old course handbook I had created. I didn't put all of it up because I don't want you guys to get confused between this and the text book that we have for the course, which is just a simple pocket manual, which has everything you ever wanted to know about grammar and MLA. So I hope that this was informative, not too scary, and we will work through the research papers together. But between now and then, you can start thinking about something you've always wanted to know more about, never had the time to research, but would like to do so now. Have a great first week, folks.